Last week, John asked me if I share a little bit about our trip to England. It's very fortunate to go visit my family in England. And then somehow that evolved into me giving a sermon this week. So I was thinking, well, what am I going to talk about? You know, and I was on a business trip this week, and I was driving, and I don't know if you ever listen to the radio. You try changing channels in the South, you get one religious program after the other on the AM channels. Anyway, I tuned in, and there was this minister was giving a sermon about Psalms 139, which Bob just read. So that's the theme of my sermon is my message today. Hope it's not too much of a sermon, but the message is being known by God and knowing Him. So my hometown in England is called St Albans. It's just north of London. And of course there's a lot of history in England, but St Albans, all I knew about him growing up was he was one of the first British martyrs, and he was martyred by having his head chopped off. Actually, the kids might enjoy this. Could be some fun, a little bit of history for them. The youngsters. That's okay, all right. But you get a history lesson, you can pass it on to them. But so St Alban, he was in England. The Romans conquered Britain, right? And in like 209, 2nd century AD. St Alban was just a regular guy, but he sheltered a priest, and because he sheltered this priest, he was executed. Okay, and that's kind of the long and the short of it. That's all they knew about it. And then fast forward to he converted also, because when he sheltered this priest, he was so impressed by the piety of this guy that he converted to Christianity, and he became beheaded. And then fast forward to 429, one of the leaders of the day, Germanus, visited St Albans tomb. Here's a picture of his tomb. That was, do you want to make it a little bit darker so you can see the pictures better? I think I can make this okay. Whoa. I need some light here.
Maybe keep them on so at least you can read.
That should work.
You want to move or?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah. So Germanus, he came to visit the. Well, this didn't exist at the time. At the time, it was just where his grave was. But he had a revelation. He had a dream, and in his dream, his revelation, what came to him was what really happened to St Albans, right? So what started off as this simple story of sheltering a priest turned into Alban was led to execution, and he presently came to a fast-flowing river which could not be crossed. That's the Bure River. I'm familiar with all these places. It's amazing reading this. There was a bridge, but a mob of curious townspeople who wished to watch the execution had so clogged the bridge that the execution party could not cross. Filled with an ardent desire to arrive quickly at Marston, Alban raised his eyes to heaven, and the river dried up, allowing Alban and his captors to cross over on dry land. The astonished executioner cast down his sword and fell at Alban's feet, moved by divine inspiration, and praying that he might either suffer with Alban, or if possible, be executed by him. The other executioners hesitated to pick up his sword, and in the meanwhile, Alban and the multitude went about 500 paces to a gently sloping hill, completely covered with all kinds of wildflowers and overlooking a beautiful plain. When Alban reached the summit of the hill, he began to thirst and prayed God would give him water, whereupon a spring immediately sprang up at his feet. It was at this place that his head was struck off, as well as that of the first Roman soldier who was miraculously converted and refused to execute him. However, immediately after delivering the fatal stroke, the eyes of the second executioner popped out of his head and dropped to the ground along with Alban's head, so that the second executioner could not rejoice over Alban's death. In later legends, Alban's head rolled down the hill after his execution, and the well sprang up where it stopped. So, that's amazing, isn't it? How that became the true story of St. Alban. That's the story that I kind of heard growing up. And that was all based on 300 years after his life. So now it's getting warm in here. It was cold, but now it's getting really hot. Am I the only one that's hot?
It's always hotter on the stage.
It's baking. So this is St. Alban's Cathedral. Two of my sisters, two other sisters, and beautiful cathedral. This is a prison next to the cathedral. It's interesting, see some prison walls here. Prisoners, they used to hang their shoe out the window on their shoestring in the hope that people would have mercy on them and put food in their shoe, and they bring the shoe back up and eat the food. So the term living on a shoestring, that's where it came from. So my trip to England was a pilgrimage of sorts. You know, I just had to go to St. Alban's Shrine. A friend of mine who's a retired school teacher met me up on a historical tour, and he gave us all these little insights. It's a really fascinating experience. It's my 90-year-old mother. So I had the opportunity to visit several shrines in England while I was there. Normally I just stay with family, but Miyako and I got to travel this time. So the first shrine we went to was the Shrine of Manchester United. Familiar with soccer, you guys?
All right.
It's the most popular club in the world.
Hey, there's Vince.
I got to go on a tour of the grounds. There's people from Japan, from China, from everywhere. They just like, it's the most famous club in the world. So for me, they were my childhood team when I was a young man. So this, for me, was a fantastic experience. This is Chris and Sachiko Jones. They live in Manchester, and we stayed with them for 3 days, stayed with their family, wonderful couple. When the hometown Providence came along, he went back to England. It's very nice to, again, Unification Church is one big family. You know, I can stay with people all over the world. I'm sure we all can. So that's actually his house. And he had the Unification symbol put on the gate. I thought that was really nice. This is another holy shrine, the United Trinity. George Best, Dennis Law, and Bobby Charlton, three most famous players in the world. And then another shrine we went to. I've never been to Liverpool in my life. I asked Bob to play a Beatles song this morning. That was the John Lennon song.
Now, how far is that from St. Albans?
That's a 3.5-hour drive north.
North.
If you look at the map of England, London's in the south, and then this is further north, 3.5 hours. And it's on Manchester is on the west coast. So we went to the Beatles Museum. It's interesting, people go to England for all this culture, the museums, the art museums, history museums. We go to see Manchester United and the Beatles, but it was a great experience. These are love locks. Apparently they're all over Europe. It's a tradition. People who are in love, they put a padlock on a fence and write their name on it. You know? But I've never seen that before. So this is in the museum. This is a replica of the Cavern, which is where the Beatles used to play. They played there like 200 times before they became famous. So it's a replica of the Cavern. And here's another shrine to John Lennon. Just heard the song Imagine. And this is a famous place in downtown Liverpool. They have another replica of the Cavern. It's bigger, so more people can go there. So we got to visit this club, and they have people playing nothing but Beatles music all the time. So it's really wonderful. Everyone goes there. It was funny. It was just one guy playing his guitar, and he goes, "Okay, who wants to hear a Ringo song?" No one said a word. right, John Lennon, yeah, everyone knows. And, I thought that was funny. No one was so interested in Ringo. But, and this isn't a shrine, but this is an interesting story. This is Manchester, England. In the Industrial Revolution, all the cotton that's grown here, most of it went to the north of England, where all the mills were. And these big mills, this is one of the largest mills in Manchester. It's now like a tourist spot. And there was a lot of child labour back then. It was pretty bad, you know, for times for people working in these factories. And we got to visit this. There's the water at the bottom right-hand corner there that powered this mill. And there's the cotton. So it's if you're interested in the cotton, this was down the street from my house. So all the cotton in North Carolina went to Manchester and the area of England, the northeast, where all the mills were. But I found this fascinating. This is just one of the. I took a photo of this, but this guy, Samuel Craig, he was kind of like the Mooney of his era, if you like. Or he was a Unitarian, and actually he wasn't a Unitarian. He married a Unitarian, and she converted him. And Unitarianism, they were kind of seen as the heretics of that age because the Universalist Unitarian, their belief is that everyone can go to heaven, regardless of dogma. And when the Nicaea came out in the 3rd century, they said it's the Trinity is the only way to heaven. You've got to believe in the Trinity. So they were maybe not the Moonies, but the Mormons of their day. They were starting to be respected because he was a businessman. But they did a wonderful thing. They really took care of their workers. They built little cottages for them, and they still employed young kids. They employed orphans. They used to buy orphans from orphanages, but they put them up in a really nice, they had a nice place in the school. So he was ahead of his time as far as how he really took care of people. So, pub, it's not a shrine, but this is a little bit of history here. This is a famous pub. It says Dam Busters Inn. And have you ever seen the movie, The Dam Busters? But these are, in the Second World War, they went on a special mission to destroy this dam. It's a fascinating story. And this is in the movie, this particular pub. When we were driving south, we saw this pub. There's another pub, that's in St Albans. That's the oldest pub in Britain. Of course, it's like every town in England says they have the oldest pub in Britain, so take that with a pinch of salt, you know. And Jack was asking about how far we drove. We drove from Manchester to Hull, across the country, one side to the other, 3 hours. So like if you go to Charlotte, you know, so it gives you an idea how small England is relative to America. Of course, this is the skinny part at the top there where it kind of narrows down, but this is a Humber Bridge. And it's bigger than for a suspension bridge, it's bigger than the Golden Gate Bridge. So back to St Albans, and as I was alluding to get more to the internal part of my message here, his life was based again on someone's dream, you know, about him. And the thing about Father, I mean, last week when we had the community meeting, I alluded to, I roll my eyes sometimes when we tend to over-glorify Father. Father was a man, right? And you don't need to over-glorify Father too much. It's all there in black and white. His history is documented. You can't argue with this. The things that Father has done in his life are there for everyone to see. He was a great man. In fact, there's almost too much documentation, maybe. You know, so, as opposed to, you know, depending on visions and dreams and guesswork, we know it. We've got Father's words. We've got his life in video and pictures. So, but Father, you know, like I say, Father was a man, all right? And do you think that that sometimes he might struggle a little bit, you know. And it's like we think Father was always 100% upbeat and positive. No, he struggled the same as everybody does. John last week suggested we look at this video and of Hunchman's sermon, and one thing he mentioned in that sermon, he talked about how when Father would come after flying for 12 hours to a place, Hawaii, wherever it was, first thing he said is, let's go out in a boat. He wants to go fishing, you know. And this, for me, when I think of Father, it's just, you know, we all think of Father as he loved to be in the ocean. And this is one way Father fed his soul, inspired himself, you know. Of course, he prayed all the time, and he was always talking to members. But when he wasn't doing that, he was out in creation. He was out in the ocean fishing. You know, this is how Father, this is my feeling, really, you know, kept himself positive, kept himself going. So this is a book I've been reading recently called Care of the Soul, and it's, well, you're probably reading that. So anyway, it's impossible to find exactly what the soul is. We know intuitively the soul has to do with genuineness and depth. As you say, certain music has soul, a remarkable person is soulful. When you look at images of soulfulness, you see that it's tied to life in all its particulars. Good food, satisfying conversation, genuine friends and experiences to stay in the memory and touch the heart. Soul is revealed in attachment, love and community, as well as in inner communication. So, we all have different ways of caring for the soul. You know, you've heard this, as it says here, I've got some examples. This, as an Englishman, for me, is soul food. So here we have, on the right, is a traditional Sunday roast. And then in the top left, we have bangers and mash. And the bottom left, we have a traditional English breakfast. So I put on a few pounds while I was doing it. I had to get back to my exercise regime. But, and music fills the soul. That was a beautiful rendition of Imagine this morning. But we all get inspired by music. And then creation, most of us went to Hanging Rock. Who went to Hanging Rock? You know, a few of us went there. It was beautiful. As a church community, we went there. This is, you know, 2 hours from here, and it's spectacular. Yeah. I go to Washington on business a lot. It's where the headquarters of the company I work for is. So that's Hanging Rock again. And then that's Mount Rainier, so I get to go there sometimes. But I don't want to, you know, anyway. And then, as you know, the family is very important to all of us. You know, just being with family, interacting with family. This was Thanksgiving. That's only an hour from North Carolina, from Raleigh. Last year, I got to go to Colorado. Just being around like our church members. You know, these kids doing GPA. 400 young kids. I mean, that really inspires you, you know, when they're out there. Our church members, you know, I'm sure they give so much to our community. I remember that a couple of weeks ago. So that's how you inspire yourself, giving back to others. Remember the GPAT coming through. That brother, Chris Jones, in England, he had some similar experience where a team came to his house and stayed with him, and he went witnessing with them, and he was so inspired by that he's starting to do his own witnessing again. It really kind of inspired him. So, and then those beautiful shining faces. And these are this is when I was in England, these are my old buddies. Back in the day, back in the 70s, we were all good friends. And so I was able to get together with my old buddies, and we're still connected. We're still artistically connected, you know. There you go. Who's that? On the bottom right there. Family and friends, community. So that all fills the soul, okay? So why? You know, we all have this, you know, ways of inspiring ourselves. Why do we still struggle I mean, be honest, you look at that list, and I'm sure that each one of you can look at that list and see something that impacts you, something that in your daily life, you know, that you still struggle with. It's like we have this great life, we have the community, our friends, we have stuff that inspires us, so why don't we still go through feelings of emptiness? You wake up in the morning and you don't feel like getting out of bed sometimes, you know? So we're all looking for that type of fulfillment. So I know, I think most of you know that one of my children, Martin, struggles with depression. He's getting treatment. He's doing much better. You know, it's everyone's aware of this. But when I realised that he had these issues a year or so back, I communicate with other family members, other church members, and I'm so amazed how many brothers and sisters in our church also have issues with their children. You know, it's not just outside our church. These challenges face everybody, and they face me too. So care of the soul. Farmers cultivate their fields, all of us cultivate our souls. The aim of soul work, therefore, is not adjustment to accepted norms or to an image of a statistically healthy individual. Rather, the goal is a rich, elaborate life connected to society, nature, woven into the culture of family, nation, and globe. The idea is not to be superficially adjusted, but to be profoundly connected in heart to ancestors and to living brothers and sisters in all the many communities that claim our hearts. To undertake restoration of the soul means to make spirituality a more serious part of our everyday life. So, I'm literally to myself here. I'm not just talking to you guys, you know. This is something, when I read this, I realised, hey, you know, this is something I need to be more serious about. We all have different ways. I'm sure a lot of people here do 100K every morning. That family we stayed with in Manchester, you know, they have 3 adult children living at home. 8 o'clock every morning they sit around and do 100K together. It's like, wow, you know. I mean, my wife, you know, does 100K. I like to walk. For me, if I don't walk in the morning, I don't feel right, you know, because I'm out there and it's like clears your head and gets you going. But we all, and then it's interesting how this guy talks about ancestors, connecting to our ancestors. I realised that, you know, that I'm not so much into it as others, but I am who I am because of my ancestors, and you have to respect that. So, whatever, you know, it inspires you to witnessing. Can you read that up top there? Church mice, we'd like to talk to you about Jesus.
Jesus.
So, you know, we talked last week about witnessing. If that lifts your soul, if it inspires you, you know, you can do it. So, another way to inspire yourself internally, you know, if you're not witnessing, is to read, of course. Some books that I've been reading lately. This one here has nothing to do with spirituality. It's just an author that I like. You know, I mean, you don't have to. You know, just reading something that's interesting is interesting. You know, book my wife is reading right now is When God Winks at You, and it's amazing how we all have these experiences in life. You know, I think the fact that I was listening to the radio and this sermon came on about Psalms 139 was maybe God giving me a message. This is what you need to talk about, your relationship with God. And that's a fascinating, there's lots of stories like that. We all have these experiences in life. Now sometimes, of course, God doesn't just wink at you, he kind of hits you with a sledgehammer, you know? And something I think, especially most people here, the older generation here, when they join the church, they had this experience with God. Everyone has a story of how they were led to the unification movement. Last year, Miyako and I, we actually went to a matching convocation in Columbus, and it just happened that on the way was a little town called Oak Hill, West Virginia. When I was a young man of 24 years old, I was hitchhiking across the States, and I stayed with my uncle at this Catholic church, Peter and Paul Catholic Church. My uncle was the priest there, Father Seamus McGuire. And so we stopped in at this church. Obviously he's not there anymore, but this old lady in her 90s was in the office, and she remembers my uncle. He officiated at her daughter's wedding like 30 years earlier. But this for me was when God really hit me over the head. You know, it wasn't just a wink. And I had been going to church for a long time, lapsed Catholic, there's lots of them out there. But I could see how much value my uncle was, the priest was to his community. This is in the Bible there. This isn't Catholic country, you know, West Virginia. But he had a school attached to his church. So a lot of people in the community would send their kids there. They weren't Catholics because, you know, they had the 2 nuns there too. And so I'm spending 2 weeks with him. I went on my way, but then I changed my whole attitude, my whole outlook. I'm going to start going to church again. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I'm at Unification Church in Denver. And that's actually where I joined the church. It's an old run-down building now. But again, we went to visit Mary Ann, the GPA workshop. And so I couldn't resist going back to this place. But back in 1980, this had 35 people living in it. There's a basement and the rafters, you know. Of course, we weren't there that often. We were always out fundraising, witnessing, you know. But again, you think back to those days. It's like, wow, you know, you were so inspired, so uplifted. It's me as a young member in Denver. So I got. Can you believe that?
Striped shirt? Or the guy
Oh,
with
yeah.
glasses?
So that's, the guy at the top right is George Love. He was about the first member in Kansas, you know. So, and then MFT, these are all MFT pictures. And I still, these bonds that we had when we joined the church are still with us today, at least they are with me, you know. Larry Sutton, he went to Spirit World about 10 years ago, unfortunately cancer. Lionel Binney, he's still a good buddy. Charles Spacek, I visited him last year, he's in Florida. Bill Casto, I met Andre at the convocation. I mean, I know all these people. I still keep in touch with them, you know, by email or phone. Well, not all of them, I can exaggerate, you know, but so you might recognise a few. This, sorry to say, that's Roddy Portman, his son passed away last week, you heard a week or so ago in that tragic accident. So those are very special memories. In MFT, you think about, you know, experiencing God. The kids that do the GPA, they always talk about, you know, you went through it. Their deepest experiences were doing the fundraising. It was the toughest, but that's where they experienced God, because they were forced to go out and confront themselves. And you go out in the last house in the last street, someone buys something to make you gold. That's not God working in your life. What is it? You know. So, but that's then. This is now. You know. It's nice to talk about those times and reflect on it. But now we're dealing with a lot of other issues. We have children that are grown. We have bills to pay. And we have jobs to do. You know. There's a lot of stress in life, you know, and I'm a salesman. I enjoy a lot of my job, you know. I get to travel, I get to meet people, but also in sales you're under a lot of pressure. At the end of the day, you've got to show a result. You know, so last week I was in Myrtle. This is just to remind me what to talk about. Where is it? Myrtle Beach. I was in Myrtle Beach last week, and I had this one big account that is struggling, and I'm trying to keep it alive. So I spent 3 days working really hard, visiting a lot of end users, these big buffets. And who's been to Myrtle Beach? Everyone's been to Myrtle. They have these buffet restaurants that serve hundreds of people. Anyway, they're potentially big business. But for whatever, anyway, without going into all the details, my pricing isn't as good as their local suppliers. It looks like this account is going to go down the tubes. So in sales, when you have a big account, losing an account, it's not the same as a death in the family, but it's close. You know? It's like, it's really heartbreaking. So here I am, and because my national sales manager, Nick Buskiewicz, is on the West Coast, so very often there's a time difference there, obviously, so his emails don't get to me. So here I am in the hotel, struggling to get out of bed. What am I going to do, you know? And I'd sent an email to him the previous day about some technical issue, right? And I jokingly said, oh, it's a message, it must be a sign from God, you know, that I have to take care of this technical issue. So here I am, I'm lying in bed, oh, what am I going to do? And I like we all do, you know, I get the phone out, and the first thing you do, if you're in my type of business, you check your emails, right? What's the latest crisis or what's going on, you know? So I click on my iPhone, and the first email I see, so this message I sent to Chris, to Nick, and his message to me was, God is speaking to you every day. So that's, you know, like God thinking at you. You know, He gives you that message. There's another salesman that's a good friend of mine. You won't want me mentioning his name. You know, Gary Abrams. Anyone know Gary Abrams? Right, and he's a character, and he's got a very outgoing personality. This guy, you know, he's always. And I remember I was only been with the company a year or so, and we're at one of our annual meetings, and I was just, his region is doing better now, but it was at the bottom of the totem pole. His results stunk, you know, and he was always so upbeat, you know. I just said to him, we were sharing a room, I said, Gary, how come you're always so upbeat when your region is so bad, you know, you're making me look good, you know. And his answer, I'll never forget it, because I know God loves him. And so for him, that's paramount in his life. So all the other stuff, who gives a darn, you know? So who should become your center? You must become God-centered instead of self-centered, and love God more than yourself. Before you existed, God already existed and was your entire being. God is your center, and consequently you exist solely for God. With one living, unchanging principle and way of life, we want to penetrate to the heart of God. So Father, you know, He's accomplished a lot of things, and there's controversy with our church and stuff, but He always taught us to love God. And He always taught us to make God the central part of our life. So that's key. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're dealing with, as long as you hold on to that relationship with God in your life, you'll be okay. So just remember that God's always there, and if you're willing to listen, He'll give you a message. So again, this is Psalms 139. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit, when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is anything offensive in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you. So blessed. We have so much in life to be grateful for, to be thankful for. And we know that whatever challenges we face in life, you're always there. You're always there for us. We can just open up our hearts and minds and realize that you will always be a part of our life. Thank you so much for the glorious history that we have. Each one of us is here because we met the Unification Church and God guided us in that direction. And we look back on our lives, we have so much to be thankful for, to be grateful for. And as we move forward with our lives, whatever challenges we face, we know that if we just stop and let you in, then you're always there, come into our hearts and uplift us. Thank you so much. Thank you, God. In the name of true parents, in the name of Sarah's family, bless you. And we pray.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. This message is the most perfect message. God is our parent, and that we have to find God in everything. Some of us, our shrines, there are many different things we do, and also our history and the history of what our true parents did. It's real, it's substantial, and especially, his words left behind through the divine principle, explanation, teaching, and the blessing so many millions of couples, creating families, and establishing this tradition. But at the core of everything is the reality that we are essentially spiritual beings, that our soul, is really our search for our soul and our continual effort to improve ourselves as a human being and become more than what we are, and that effort to develop that internal aspect of our life that is very intangible. It's not easy. We can't put our fingers on it, but truly it is real. The true Father's, all of his speeches, the core principle he said in his life, the main point was to teach that God is our parent. Number one, God is our parent. He loves us. We're his children. And number two, we have an eternal existence. If we only look at our life through physical eyes, through material, then you're missing. You cannot get it right. It's impossible to get it right. If you look at the world and some of the terrible things that happen, even the example of St. Albans, this is a man who's about to be beheaded, but he had such this confidence that, whatever the true story is, we know that he was beheaded and he really had faith in God and believed in Jesus. So he had this vision that there was more to his life than just his physical body. And so he had this sense of bigness. And that's absolutely essential for us. We cannot forget that we are spiritual beings and we have an eternal nature. So that as we do get older and, things don't work out as we would like them to, or we do have responsibilities, and some days, the burden of our job or our family situation becomes heavy. Poor, Rodney Portelance, wonderful brother losing his son suddenly in a terrible tragedy. I mean, this could rip your heart out if we don't understand God knows our situation. He is our parent, and he loves us. And we have an eternal existence. So Rodney's son is not gone. He's in the next life. And someday we will be there. Those two key points. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Vince. You made it really clear. So, very wonderful. And I'd like to make a point, as Vince mentioned, I had sent out for people to listen to Youngjanim's speech. And Vince mentioned one little part of his speech that was very inspiring about True Father's life, but if anybody has actually watched the entire content of what he had to say, I can imagine that there might have been some content there that was very shocking and surprising and maybe very confronting, because he has a very strong attitude now and an opinion about things that are going on in our movement, in his relationship with his own mother and in his family and so forth. So I want to make a point. If anybody saw this video or if they heard his speech and he said some things that they're concerned about, please share with each other, and also you come to me and you can talk to me about it. and we can have a discussion. My intention and my purpose for sending that out was so that we would be aware, aware of what this, this brother of ours, this son of true father, what is he thinking? What is he feeling? What is he going through? Like each one of us, the true family, the true children, just as Vince pointed out, true father himself, he was a man. He had emotion. He told us many times that he had to fight with his own nature, that he had to struggle, to not be angry, that he was like Moses who wanted to, kill the Egyptians. And, Father was like that. He had to bite his tongue. And maybe sometimes he didn't. I know there are stories of Father exploding, in members, during the 32 city speaking tour, when he would, after the speeches, when the halls weren't filled, he would be very uptight and very frustrated, and sometimes he would, scream at the members, why was the hall not filled? Why wasn't everybody there? Why didn't they come, And it just, can you imagine? I mean, it's just painful. But then Father would wrestle with this, and then his nature would change, and he'd be making a joke or telling a story. I'm sorry, I have to tell this one story to make the point. I remember very specifically, Kevin McCarthy said when True Father came to North Carolina, during that time, there was a group of many brothers and sisters that were here, and there was one brother, Perry Cordell. Does anyone know Perry Cordell? Real tall, very tall brother. I don't know where he is right now, but he was one of these like commanders of an IOWC, and I worked with him in New Jersey. Anyway, he was sitting at the table. This was here in North Carolina, and this was after one of Father's speech. And Father was hitting the table. Why wasn't more people here? Why weren't more? And this was when they were about to eat, and the soup had already come to the table. And Father was hitting this table like this, and the soup was bouncing up. Why weren't more people here? And Perry Cordell, a big tall guy, he was sitting like this. He was just, his head was so down. And then I heard the story of how True Mother, she was pushing Father like, oh, stop, and eventually Father was pushing her away, and he was trying to hit, and Mother was going up and teasing Father and tickling him, and eventually he changed his attitude, and he started smiling and laughing and everything, and then, people were quiet and everything, and people were starting to eat, but Perry Cordell was just like this, sitting with his head down, and Father pushed the soup in front of Perry, pushed the soup in front of him, and Perry pushed his soup away, and then Father reached out and looked at him and picked up his head and smiled and said, "What's the matter, Perry? Lose your appetite?" kind of like that. But the point is very profound. Father was a person like us. And so, Father even told us. I remember Father said, if I do something unprincipled, you shouldn't follow me. What if Father did something wrong? But, Father stayed true to his determination all his life. But the point is still very clear that each of us, Father himself, Mother herself, the true children themselves, and each one of us here, that is our mission in life, is to feed our soul and to become the true son and the true daughter. And true parents did it. They really did, under extremely difficult circumstances. They maintained a standard of love and multiplied that love from the individual to the family, to the tribe, to the society, to the nation, going out to the world and to the universal level, and setting this example and this standard. That's what we have to inherit from them. So really, thank you, Vince. I really liked this service this morning, and it really clicks into exactly the core of what we need to know and think about and pray about. So, even though there's a small number of us here, but, Sunday service, this is where Christians used to meet God once a week on Sunday. They would, the world was controlled by evil, and they would come to church, and in this holy shrine, God would be here. And they would make these conditions, and then they would experience God. But it's changed. Everywhere we go is a holy place. Everything we do every day, your business, your school, your university, anything is a holy ground. Father has made holy ground everywhere. That's what it means to liberate God. So we should be finding God every day. When we leave here, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Thursday night, wherever we're at, whatever we're doing, whatever, small groups or whatever our hobby or our interest is, God is there. God wants to be there. God wants to be with us. So we need to really bring Him with us in everything that we do. So, every moment is time to be with God as our parent in all circumstances.